Mary Adler, Frank Adler's niece, is being beckoned from the restroom. She dislikes the clothing she will be wearing to school on her first day. The one-eyed cat Fred lives with Frank and Mary in their modest house. Frank then departs to deliver Mary to the bus stop. When she leaves, Frank's neighbor Roberta notices him. Frank is followed inside his home by Roberta, who warns him that he must take action for Mary or risk losing her. Mary begins her first day of first grade in Miss Bonnie Stevenson's math lesson. Mary feels annoyed when Bonnie asks basic arithmetic questions because she is the only student in the class that knows more complex math. On her own, she completes a multiplication problem, even stating the number's square root. Mary yells at Principal Davis as she walks into the room to phone Frank and excuse herself from class. Frank comes to fetch Mary up after school. Bonnie scurries outdoors to grab him and talk about Mary's amazing arithmetic prowess. According to Frank, Mary learned the Trachtenberg technique so she could memorize equations and mathematical operations. In order to understand what Frank was referring to, Bonnie later looks up the Trachtenberg approach. She also researches Diane, who was a great mathematician until she committed herself when Mary was just 6 months old, and was the mother of Mary and Frank. Frank lectures Mary about why she shouldn't have yelled at the principal while taking her out on a boat for a day at the beach. Mary does seem to be regretful. Later, Frank enters the bar he frequents on Friday nights and sees Bonnie approaching him. She challenges Frank about what he did and what he omitted to tell her about Mary. Frank describes how Diane approached him one night and how he was unaware of what she would go on to accomplish. He picked up Mary after discovering Diane on the floor in the restroom. While riding the school bus, Mary notices Justin, a student, walking with a zoo diorama that she feels superior than the one she created. Justin breaks his diorama after being tripped by Ricky. Mary grabs a textbook from another child and whacks Ricky in the face, fracturing his nose. Mary yells at Ricky for what he did. The event results in Frank being contacted. Principal Davis contemplates dismissing Mary, but decides against it and offers giving her a scholarship to the Oaks Academy for Gifted Education instead, since a student with Mary's intelligence would fit in better there. Frank, however, won't let it happen because he believes Mary needs a typical childhood and education. Later, Mary apologizes to her class for punching Ricky. Frank's estranged mother Evelyn pays Frank and Mary a surprise visit. She presents Mary with a laptop. Then, Evelyn spends time criticizing Frank's living situation and Mary's educational system, which Frank doesn't find surprising. She tells Frank that she is looking out for Mary's best interests and wonders what Diane would think about Mary's current lifestyle. Evelyn wants to take Mary and provide her the greatest education possible to increase Mary's future potential. After that, Frank and Evelyn start a custody dispute. Frank is represented by Greg Cullen, while Evelyn is represented by Aubrey Highsmith. Cullen supports Frank's living circumstances, while Highsmith claims that Frank unlawfully obtained custody of Mary. It has been decided that Evelyn will have some alone time with Mary while Frank and Mary are checked on. While he goes out for drinks with Bonnie, Frank leaves Mary with Roberta for the evening. Bonnie is initially hesitant, but they do end up getting together. And the next morning, Mary unexpectedly visits Bonnie while she is still covered in a bedsheet. When Mary finds her, Bonnie flees in a haughty manner. Mary feels as though Frank is unable to have a personal life because of her, because Frank chastises her for leaving Roberta's house when she wasn't supposed to. Mary is taken to Boston by Evelyn. She presents Mary with images of Diane and tells her about Diane's lifelong research into the Navier-Stokes issue. Evelyn takes Mary to see Seymour Shanklin John Sklaroff, her co-worker, so they can discuss an equation he attempted to solve. Shanklin dismisses Mary's seeming confusion as just a matter of her being unable to understand his work at this time. Mary says she was perplexed since Shanklin's equation was incorrect. As Evelyn removes her, Mary comes back and fixes it on her own. Pat Golding, a psychologist, begins treating Mary. Pat finds out a lot about Mary's life, including the fact that she doesn't have any friends her own age, and considers Roberta to be her best friend. When Mary says that she and Roberta watch UFC fights every week, Pat is apprehensive. Bradley Pollard, Mary's biological father, presents evidence for Evelyn at the subsequent court proceeding. Bradley is questioned by Cullen about his lack of interest in Mary's life and his inability to even remember her middle name. Bradley will not be granted any type of custody, the judge decides. When Mary finds out that her father was nearby, she sobs bitterly since he didn't bother to come see her. To lift her spirits, Mary is brought to the hospital by Frank and Roberta to observe a family waiting for the arrival of a new baby. The family applauds when they learn that a boy has been born. Frank explains to Mary that this is how it was when she was born, and that he came out to announce it. Evelyn and Frank show up back in court. Frank is interrogated by Highsmith as he provides testimony regarding his current work as a freelance boat repairman and his previous arrest for violence when employed as an assistant professor at Boston University. Highsmith is still adamant that Frank is depriving Mary of a promising future. Cullen questions Evelyn about the circumstances of Diane's dying in turn. Later, out of concern that they will lose the case and Frank will lose full custody of Mary, Cullen goes to Frank's house and informs him that he and the judge have reached an agreement whereby Mary would be placed in foster care until the age of 12, at which point she can choose where to live. Cullen implores Frank to accept the offer. When Frank first meets the foster parents, he notices that their home and family are both nice. Mary begs Frank not to leave her during their sorrowful farewell as he leaves her there. Mary tears and shouts for Frank, but he must unfortunately leave. When Frank tries to see Mary after some time, the foster father informs him that she doesn't want to see Frank. A flyer for a lost cat named Fred is discovered by Bonnie. She mails Frank the photo, who subsequently joins Bonnie at the animal shelter because he appears to be aware of the situation. He not only gets Fred back, but he also gets 2 more cats. When Frank visits the foster home, he learns that Evelyn is residing in the guest house and that Mary is being tutored by 2 people. Mary is first upset to see Frank, but she eventually melts down and hugs him. After that, Frank visits Evelyn and gives her a gift she had never seen before: Diane's finished research on the Navier-Stokes issue. Evelyn believes it's a hoax and that Diane would have wanted it released as quickly as possible. Frank reveals that Diane had asked to delay the publication of the book until after Evelyn passed away. She takes this quite hard. If Evelyn gives Frank custody of Mary, Frank promises to get the book published. If not, the book won't be released until Evelyn passes away. Frank adjourns. Evelyn phones Shankland after sobbing uncontrollably. Frank and Mary have returned home. She has started enrolling in afternoon college classes. She is picked up by Frank, who then takes her with Bonnie and the other students to the park.